everybody. Welcome to an amazing episode of Wrestling with the Future. I'm your host, Angelo DeCipio, joined as I am by the Happy Haberdasher each and every week, Dan the Man Sebastiano. Daniel, you're looking dapper tonight. I see we have a change of hats. This is a little different for you. PlayStation. Talk to me about the hat tonight.
The hat I was going to wear just wasn't fitting right, and this is my emergency desk hat. So...
Well, I'll tell you what, it's interesting that you have the PlayStation hat on because we got a guy tonight that's quite the player. We're going to bring him in here in a couple of minutes. But before we do, I want to tell everybody about some upcoming guests we've got, some returning guests, actually. The return of Cowboy Scott Casey, and he'll be joining, actually, our guest tonight. So we're going to reunite Mansfield and Casey on Wrestling with the Future, and that will be a barn burner. I'm just going to let him have it, and you and I are going to sit back and drink coffee. And we got the return of Vince Russo. Lanny Poffo will be joining us again. Ron Fuller, the Tennessee Stud. Oh, we've got it's a who's who of pro wrestling, I want to tell you. And so tonight, let us bring in our guest of honor for the evening. And Dan, he's been here before, and tonight's show is part 2 with an old friend, an old school wrestling icon, television and movie producer, and controversial figure in pro wrestling, the Continental lover, Eddy Mansfield. He was one of the leaders in trying to keep kayfabe alive back in the 1980s, along with people like Dr. D. David Schultz, while people like Vince McMahon Jr. and Hulk Hogan were trying to kill it. We will talk wrestling history, today's wrestling product, and just about anything else and everything that comes to mind. So tonight, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. The Continental lover, our friend, our buddy, Eddy Mansfield. Eddy, how you doing, baby?
And how you doing? And Dan, how you doing? Hey, I'm live and in color from Houston, Texas, where me and the Cowboys sold out that Sam Houston Coliseum many, many times. And I'm so glad to be back on the show. And hey, we'll rock the world with this one. Just let me know that.
Oh, brother, this is
no
holds barred.
Strap yourself in, because it's going to be one hell of a ride, baby.
Absolutely.
And hey, I wasn't hard of hearing, Angelo, was I? That you got that nanny goat rider coming on, Scott Casey?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You know, when I was wrestling Scott Casey, I'd be riding down the road. We'd be going like to say, you know, like Seguin or wherever the hell we were going. Yeah. And I look on the side of the road, and there's Scott Casey on a horse trying to lasso a nanny goat. Can you imagine? And I used to tell all them cowboys here in Texas, I ain't seen a cowboy since I hit Texas, you know? And
well, I heard that story, Eddy. Yeah, listen, I gotta ask you a question. You know, it's funny because it's funny how things happen. I'm sitting today watching some of our old shows, and I saw a show that we did, Dan and I did with Karen McDaniel, and I gotta ask you. I didn't even begin to scratch the surface of your stories with Wahoo, so So I want to get into a little bit of, because Dan and I love Wahoo. He's one of our favorite subjects in the show. And we love Karen.
I love Wahoo too. I love him.
Karen is
you know.
Yeah, well, Karen's a dear friend of the show, you know. Karen McDaniel, Wahoo's wife. And so go ahead, Dan. Why don't you and Eddy talk a little Wahoo?
Yeah, Eddy, we had Scott on, and I was asking how he was telling us some stories. So I'm curious. Wahoo was famous for his antics on the road. Do you have any good road stories from your time with Wahoo?
Oh, there's so many. It's unbelievable. From us shooting deer and throwing them in a trunk to you know, it's like you know, Cowboy Scott Casey. He'd come in, you know, crying like the wimp he is. He would cry, and you know, and he would look at Wahoo, and Wahoo would look at him and say, "If you're looking for sympathy, you know, sympathy is alphabetically in between shit and syphilis, so don't look for sympathy here." And it's so true. And let me tell you, Scott Casey was probably one of the most underrated wrestlers in the history of the business.
That's guy, absolutely.
Me and that cowboy could sell out any arena in any town, anywhere there was professional wrestling was on the marquee, because Cowboy Scott Casey and Eddy Mansfield was like two Brahma bulls. You never knew who was going to win. You never knew. And all the girls loved me, but they always cheered for him, and I couldn't get it,
Well,
I would always do something to piss them off, because I was 230 pounds of twisted steel and sex appeal and a rich woman's lover and a poor girl's dream. I mean, and this guy ain't nothing but a damn nanny goat rider. So what the hell, what am I missing here,
Well, let me ask you a question. I heard that when you and Cowboy used to go round and round, they used to raise the ticket prices down there.
Well, they had to, man, because bottom line is they had to pay Scott and myself.
Yeah.
Money, and and the chief had to get his cut, and so between us three, they had to pay us. And
that's right. Yeah, we forgot that Wahoo was a booker for a lot of this stuff.
Let me tell you something. Wahoo McDaniel, Scott Casey, and myself are the ones who popped Southwest Championship Wrestling. And I'm going to give you a little history right now.
There you go.
On a weekend, Wahoo McDaniel and myself, Wahoo had stolen me from Atlanta to get me out of Atlanta to come to Southwest.
Right.
And so the chief and myself were the first guys in the history of pro wrestling to be on two nationally syndicated programs on the same weekend. One was TBS at 6:05, and the following morning at 10:30. I think at 10:30 on USA Network.
Yeah, you are absolutely right. You know what, Eddie? I'm glad you mentioned that. I forgot about that. Honestly, God, I forgot about that. You're absolutely right.
And that's something I really treasure, because it's never been done before.
Yeah.
And I was able to do it with the chief, and the chief was one of the greatest athletes that ever was in the squared circle. And same with Scott Casey. They could say what they want about Scott.
Right.
And people can say what they want about me or Wahoo, but the bottom line is we put asses 18 inches between each other and sold out everywhere we ever went, me and Scott Casey.
True, absolutely true. Eddie, you've worked that loop there around the Southwest territory for quite some time, all the way into Florida. You knew Eddie and Mike Graham. Those names have come up a lot on the show, Eddie and Mike Graham. I want to talk.
Let me tell you a story.
Are you okay talking about Eddie? Are you okay talking about Eddie? Because I mean, a lot of people are touchy about talking about Eddie Graham.
I don't give a shit about talking about Eddie Graham. I don't give a shit about talking about Mike Graham. It doesn't matter to me,
Okay. Well, I'm not. That's cool with me. It's funny because.
Hey, let me tell you something. I was a television champion. They put that on me the first day I was there, right?
Yeah.
And I told my dear friend, the late great Jack Briscoe, and I was shooting an angle with Jerry Briscoe, and the houses was starting to come up, but the problem was the paycheck sucked, right?
Yeah.
And so I just had to. I walked in and I said, I can't stay here much longer. And Jack says, please don't leave, Ed. I said, well, Jack, shit, my paycheck don't even cover my bar bill. I said, we got a problem. and so I'll never forget. Now this I got to tell you this story. This a few years, but right before then, that Harley Race asked me, No, it was right out of Tampa. I think it was right out of Tampa. He asked me, "Would you go into Kansas City and shoot a hot angle with George Wells and try to get the territory going?" And I looked at him. I said, "Are you gonna be there?" He goes, "Yeah, I'll be there." Well, he was only there one day, and so I swear to you, by the second week, true words are never spoken. And so I walked in, I got my paycheck and I went, okay. So so the next morning I walked in the office. Terry Garvin, he was gay as a $3 bill. And so I walked in, "Hey, Terry, how you doing?" He goes, "Oh, my boy, how are you?" I said, "Good." And I said, "Is Bob Geigel here?" He goes, "Yeah, Bob's here." And so I walked over to Bob. I said, "Bob," I said, "let me tell you something. I love Kansas City." He goes, "Oh, man, that's great." And he's got his glasses looking down. And I said, "The barbecue here is great. All this other stuff's good." And I said, something? The only problem we got, if I'd have brought more money, I could have stayed longer. Did you get that? If I'd have brought more money, I could have stayed longer. In other words, my money was so funny, I didn't have enough to pay attention. And so.
I got you. Yeah.
Boy, you slow, man. Are you? It's like, man. And so, let me tell you, Angelo, that Kansas City, got, if the United States needed an enema, they'd stick it in Kansas City.
Well, it's fun. We've heard stories. I want to keep it along that subject line, because they say when Harley Race ran Kansas City, Missouri, and St. Louis, it was among the most lucrative time because the guys who worked got paid and they kept coming back. They drew money.
It wasn't Harley Race. It wasn't Harley Race.
Who was it?
The most lucrative time in the history of Kansas City wrestling was when Buck Robley was their booker.
Oh, Buck.
And
Buck, yeah.
Buck popped that place, and nobody booked St. Louis but Sam Muchnick and Larry Matizak. That was
right.
It. Nobody else. And Sam, let me compare promoters. Sam Muchnick was like a Paul Bosch was in Houston. When you came to Houston, you knew you were gonna make some big money.
Yeah.
Regardless, he was a great payoff guy.
Right.
So was Sam Muchnick in St. Louis. You needed 100,000 of those guys, but it just didn't work that way. But they had two strong towns that sold out all the time, and it was a pleasure for me to be able to work for those guys. It really was.
Well, and I asked because we've had people on the show talked about the horrible payoffs among some of the promoters. Bob Geigel was among those people, was a great promoter, but they say that Bob was as stingy as the day is long, but he's a hell of a promoter. And he was a nice guy on top of it. But then by contrast, you've got people like Don Owens, that was a great promoter and a great payoff guy. Eddie Graham was one of those people, and I wanted to talk about Eddie and Mike because they were among those people who understood the business because they were in the business and they appreciated the guys and paid them accordingly. Is there a fundamental difference between working for a wrestler? Working for a promoter booker that was a wrestler and a promoter booker who never stepped into the ring? What's the difference?
Well, to me, Eddie Graham's payoff wasn't the greatest, and I don't know if Scott will tell you the same thing. And I was one of the top guys down there. Yeah. And, my money was so funny, I didn't have enough to pay attention from there. And so it's like, so if you ask me about my experience, Eddie Graham knew the business. He had great finishes, all this other stuff, but his payoffs were for the shits.
Yeah.
And it is what it is. And it's not my fault. You know, he would, squeeze them Eagles until, they screamed. and so it is what it is. I mean, you can ask Scotty when he comes on. Ask Scott Casey, how were the payoffs in Florida versus the payoffs at Southwest Championship Wrestling? Here's Joe Blanchard. Joe Blanchard was a good payoff guy. Now
it's funny, Eddie, because our friend here, Dan the Man, just did an exclusive one-on-one interview with Scott. So Dan, why don't you and Eddie have a little discussion about our mutual friend Scott Casey? You just talked to him for damn near 2 hours almost.
Yeah, we had Scott on, and I had the pleasure of talking with him, and we got to, obviously, Scott, I kind of just asked a couple of basic questions, and he had stories for days, and that's where Angelo started with the Wahoo, because I brought up that he's the favorite of the show, and Karen McDaniel's a friend of the show, and he had some stories, and he had some interesting bits about the road that, he talked about, obviously, traveling, and he said the same thing that we've heard so many times before, 300, 400, 500 matches a year, that these kids today just don't get it. You hear, I mean, social media, some of the wrestlers today sports entertainers today will, talk about, this exhaustive schedule. I wrestled 14 times this month. It's like, wait a minute. I know indie guys that wrestle more than that. And so I was wondering if you had some insight to kind of expand, because he really was talking about the road of what that was like, kind of the mentality of going from Texas to Florida to the Carolinas to Tennessee and just traveling all around. And I'm wondering, because you were a heel for a good portion of your run.
My whole career I was a heel.
Yeah.
Well, now let me ask you something then, going off that, because that was something we got into with him, was talking about how you travel, how you book. When you're a marquee face, it's easy to say, look, so-and-so's coming to town, and the people want to see, they want to see your Andres and Bruno when you travel and all that. As a heel, as someone who the fans want to boo, want to see lose, want to see get their comeuppance, does it have the same draw? Do you... back in the territory days when you were traveling, how did you as a heel kind of sell yourself on being a traveling attraction when you're the person the crowd wants to boo?
Well, number one, I always carried myself as a superstar. And when I went in a restaurant, I demanded 8 tables, and I still do today. And so the bottom line is this: if you are a star, you behave like a star. If you want to be star, you ain't gonna you'll never make it, and because you don't know what it takes to be a star, and it takes more than just showing up to be a star, and you got to live it 24/7. And I live it 24/7 to this day. And when I walk into a restaurant, I expect an 8 table, and I expect service, and I tip accordingly. Believe me, there people that wait on me, they'll fight to wait on me. And it's just the way you carry yourself. And I learned how to be a real superstar from Wahoo McDaniel.
That's interesting.
He taught me how to be a real star.
Well, if you don't mind me have expanded on that a little bit, one of the stories Scott Casey told was about an event. He was talking about Lou Thez watching the curtain jerker matches and everything. And he said, even as champion, even as often regarded as one of the best, he said you can always learn something from watching the guys. I'm curious, because he implied Wahoo was a lot like that too. Always willing to learn, always willing to watch and look. Kind of expand on that. When you say you learned from him, how did he work as a mentor figure for you?
Well, when I he talked me into leaving Atlanta. I had a good deal, going in Atlanta. I was, partners with Austin Idol, and then I was working, matches, angles with like Eddie Graham and not Eddie Graham, Eddie Gilbert, and some of the other guys, from Tommy Rich to, Wrestling 2 to some of the other, guys. But Wahoo, he saw me work, and then he listened to me do my promos, and I'll never forget this. He came up to me, and I'm standing by the side of the ring in Georgia, after I've been cutting some promos, for the loop. And so he walked up to me and he says, "Hey, I just want to say something to you." I go, "Okay." He said, "You remind me of Ray Stevens, Ric Flair, Dusty Rhodes, all in one guy."
Oh, wow.
And I looked at him, and I said, "I really don't know how to take that, Wahoo." I said, "I know Ray Stevens, I know Ric Flair, and I know Dusty Rhodes. Now, what do you mean by that? Do you mean the other side of these guys or the ring work? What do you mean?" He goes, "Oh, no, the ring work." He said, "That's what, that I see in you." He said, I would love to bring you to Southwest because you will sell out in Southwest." And so we kind of cut a deal right there at the ring. And then on that coming Saturday, I think this was on a Wednesday night in Columbus, Georgia, of all places. And so I think that I cut a deal with him there. And then my first shot was in Del Rio, Texas. That's the first sellout they had, was me and Wahoo in Del Rio, Texas, and it was in 1980. And then I had a deal with Wahoo that I could pick who I could do my angle with, plus I'd get a job guy, and plus I would do color commentary.
Oh, wow.
And get myself over. That was my deal with the Chief. And let me tell you something. If the Chief tells you something, he's a man of his word. And I'm sitting here telling you that everything that Wahoo McDaniel told me came to life and more.
Well, I have to tell you something, Eddie, and let me just chime in there for a second. And this is on record, and it's on our show, and Dan was actually on the show when Karen said this. And Dan, you'll remember, Karen told the story, and she said that when Eddy Mansfield went on television on 2020 and exposed the business, Wahoo said, "My career is over, our business is dead." And Dan, that's what she said. It's on record. We have it on video. How do you respond to something like that, Eddie?
Well, it's awful funny. I had a few conversations for a while after that, but I think what I did to the business, I made the business bigger.
Can I tell you what I think, if it matters to you? I think you were protecting kayfabe. A lot of people saying that you destroyed kayfabe. I got news for you, brother. Vince McMahon and Hulk Hogan. I said it in my intro, and I meant it. I wrote that intro, by the way. Vince McMahon and Hulk Hogan destroyed kayfabe. Eddie Mansfield had nothing to do with that. Eddie Mansfield and David Schultz were trying to protect kayfabe.
Well, what we was trying to do, I was trying to get health benefits
for the boys,
and for everybody, for us. And and I don't want to keep rehashing this John Stossel little bastard, but
fuck him.
He's a side note. He's a side
note. But he double crossed me. It became an ego piece for him instead of doing the story that compared $1 billion industry of professional wrestling to the Major League Baseball, NFL, the NBA and the NHL.
Right.
How they took care of their guys. People don't understand that professional wrestlers.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hello,
Eddie. We have a caller on the line. We have a caller on the line, Eddie.
I want to speak to Eddy Mansfield. I want that damn Eddy Mansfield on the phone now.
Well, you got
Eddie
Mansfield.
There's a gentleman.
Is this the Continental? Is this the Continental lover?
It certainly is.
Well, let me tell you, I've been chasing you for 40 years, brother. I've been chasing you since Ethel's Gas House in Columbus, Georgia. Do you remember that, brother?
Yeah, I've been there. I've been there many years.
Yeah. Well, do you remember who was your favorite band there, brother?
Oh, hey, Randy, how are you?
Randy from Brandy, brother. Randy from Brandy.
Yeah.
Andy,
how are you?
How are you? I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good, my friend. Good to speak to
you. That's been over 40 years. That's how long that we started. And you were the biggest inspiration that I've ever had in getting into wrestling.
Well, I really appreciate that, Randy.
You did, and just the bit of a, it started at like I said, Ethel's Gas House at the old Holiday Inn in Columbus, Georgia. You come in after matches, and I'd be playing up there on Wednesday, and I knew you because I was just your biggest fan forever. And we started talking and got a relationship. I remember you used to come over and we'd lay by the pool in the sun because you wanted to get suntan and all that. I tell you, I remember so much of that stuff. Eddie, we had, and I have spoken fondly of you since.
Hey, I remember that girl you hooked me up with from Montgomery, Alabama. Remember?
Hello.
I do. And I couldn't do nothing because my wife was there.
Alabama will never be the same. Randy, how you doing, baby?
Tell you.
Eddie, I got to tell you something. I'm going to tell you something.
Angelo.
Yeah.
Angelo. I got to give him. I got to give Randy his plugs, brother. He fixed me up with 9 and heavy chains. He don't go with no ugly women.
Heavy chains.
Hey, 9 and heavy chains. Hey, this is one of the greatest guys I ever have had the pleasure of ever meeting.
I got to tell you something, Eddie. Randy's a dear friend of mine. He's a dear friend of the show. I'm honored to call him friend. In fact, you'll see from time to time, I still wear the Randy Mania shirt on our show. I give him a shout out every time we can.
Yes, you do.
And I said, you know what? We got Eddy Mansfield coming on the show. He says, I got to come on. I've known Eddie for 40 years. So, and I got to say hi. At least you got to say hi to him. So, Randy's got an open invite here anytime he wants, Eddie. So just so you know that he's liable to pop in anytime.
Hey,
but everybody knows.
Angelo.
Yes, sir.
You don't realize how good this guy can sing. This guy can flat ass sing.
Oh, I know. He's a hell of a musician. He's a hell of a wrestler, too. I got news for you, brother. Yeah.
Well, that's just second of all. I mean,
I've been a jobber my whole life.
Hey, he actually could sing. This guy, I used to love. That's the only reason I used to go up to Ethel's when he was there. I would go see him, and I'd get all the guys to stop in and see Randy because they were so good. They really were a great band.
Oh, yes.
And not only being a good friend, he's just a great human being. You can't get him better than that.
And I like Randy. I like Randy a lot.
And I can't say that. I can't say enough good about Eddie. Now I'm going back before. Angela, I told you my story getting started in Columbus, and Eddie and I, all the talks we had now and all this stuff, he never broke kayfabe on me. Never did.
Yeah.
Really?
So when I started, and then I started going to the gym, once in a while, the Oats gym there. And, of course, Eddie was traveling around a lot and everything.
Yeah.
And that's how they'll show himself. But he always stayed in character. I mean, I can't believe circumstances kept him from reaching his
well, you know what, Randy,
potential.
It's funny, Randy, that you mentioned that, because just before you chimed in here, just seconds before you came in, that's exactly what we were talking about. You know, protecting kayfabe, protecting the business.
He did.
Let me have I want your heads up on it, your insight. There are people on both sides of the coin. Eddy Mansfield killed kayfabe. Eddy Mansfield was protecting the boys. What do you say?
Well, first of all, you're right. They didn't have the information out they have now. There had been other people that have broken kayfabe even before Eddy. You know,
Sure.
Eddy did things, and like you said, a lot of people, both sides of the coin, misinterpret maybe his intentions. Okay, he wasn't mad at the business. He was mad. No, he was mad at the business part, not at the boys, not at the workers, not to hurt the business. He wanted to help the boys. Okay, and through some people that we won't name names, but there were bookers at the time and the promoters at the time and things.
Oh, we can name names.
It's just a shame.
Absolutely, we can name names. Vince McMahon.
Well, Eddie's favorite was what? Eddie, one of your favorites was Ole Anderson, right?
Yeah, right. You know, Rainer, I'm going to let you talk, and then I'll fill in at the end. So go ahead.
Sir.
Great.
Continue.
Like I said, I don't know the stories, and I just love hearing this. But Eddie the person, anyways, other than that, like I said, he never broke kayfabe. He was 100% business. I know he went to the gym, he worked out, he kept his tan. He was a nice person. Even me, I was like a 6-year-old fan. I was like a kid in a candy shop. I'm sitting next to Eddy Mansfield, you know, and I went that way. And now here I was like 30 years old. I wasn't no young kid, you know.
Yeah. Sure.
And Eddie was just so warm and open and friendly to me. I remember, Eddie, you were in one of the magazines, Inside Wrestler, Pro Wrestling Illustrated, whatever, and there was an article on you when you was in the hospital. Was your leg in a cast or something?
Right.
Real. Oh, I don't know what it was. And you autographed that for me. I still have it. Have it.
Wow.
That's cool.
That's it. And then when Eddie came down to Florida, he started his little wrestling promotion, which went good. And really, I think, Eddie, you were the catapult to a couple of guys that really went big. Billy Gunn being one of them. Damian Demento, remember the old IWS days? Went on to the Fed. Yeah. Eddie gave them their start. Eddie gave them their start.
And a guy by the name of RVD, and another guy I trained was Kevin Kelly.
There you go. Absolutely. So anyways, Eddie started that down here. I had a restaurant at the time, and I used to feed the boys once in a while. And actually, on the TV show, I was one of the sponsors. So this is the way I've developed through Eddie. And had he not been an upstanding representative of the business, okay, regardless of all that other bullshit that people talking about, if he would not have been number one in the business, and in my eyes, as a fan, and then later as a small-time performer, you know, I wouldn't have had these conversations or this relationship, or feel the warmth in my heart that I still feel for him. Well, and Eddie, you probably still live an hour from me.
This is a question. You said when you started the conversation, Randy, you said that Eddie was an influence to you and a kind of a role model. So what aspect of your personality or your character, what aspect of your wrestling persona did he influence or affect the greatest in your opinion?
Well, I'll tell you, as of right now, even Eddie was technically sound. I mean, old school, but Eddie was a wrestler. He could wrestle.
Oh, yes.
And Eddie could cheat with the best of them, okay? But above that, Eddie was great with a mic. You put a mic in front of Eddie's face, and he's going. I mean, he was up there with
cutting promos earlier tonight.
So what Eddie impressed on me a lot too, which some of the guys did, but the but Eddie in particular, as I got to know him, is the importance of the personality. Anybody can do a headlock and a leg drop and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But to get that mic to fill the seats without ever stepping in the ring, Eddie has that talent. And that's what I wanted to do more than anything. Okay. And luckily, I really wasn't afraid of being on stage since I'd done it musically for so long. And I was such a wrestling fan and loved it so much. But personality, I guess, is the biggest thing I from Eddie. And then by the time I was getting into it, he was, I think, out in Texas doing his Scott Casey thing, blowing up the West and out in L.A. and stuff. And I just went through the little Columbus, Georgia beginnings and start, and then moved on and moved around. And then, of course, Eddie was out, and Eddie started promotion down here, and we got together and did a little, at least talk and that. And then Eddie, you were in Orlando, and of course, that's where I'm at now. So, I just always kept in touch. So when Angelo told me that Eddy Mansfield's going to be on, also, I got to be on. I got to say hi to Eddie.
Go ahead, Dan.
Just so you know, Eddie, how much influence you had in me, and as a young kid, as a fan, talking to you right now, I'm still like a little 10-year-old kid. I'm just so excited talking to you. I followed your career. I got your autographs, your magazines, the memories that I got. You were just such an influence all the way around, and I want to thank you for that. And hopefully we'll get together again, either at a Legends lunch or something. I missed the last one. I was in the hospital, but anyways, that's the influence you got on a young fan who's an old, busted up old man right now. So,
well,
in fact, right now I'm looking at. I love you too, Eddie. Always have, and you know that.
Exactly.
But I'm sitting here right now looking at my ankle brace. I had a full ankle replacement about a month ago.
Goodness.
So so I can't even put any weight on it until December and that. And you know how I did that, son of a bitch?
How?
In Ted Oates' ring, learning how to wrestle, how to do leapfrogs. I'm doing leapfrogs and I come down on the side of my ankle. And it took it took it almost 40 years to get to the point where I just couldn't stand the pain no more. So I had it.
Wow.
Actually, they replaced it. No fusion, just replaced it. Anyway, enough about me.
Oh, that's horrible.
You're just now having it fixed?
Yeah.
Better late than never, I guess.
Dan,
well, back then you didn't want to take time off, and you put whatever kind of monkey piss they had on it. They're supposed to take the pain away, and nothing worked, and you wore braces and that. As far as wrestling, you got a lot of support in them boots.
Oh yeah.
And I always had a brace on underneath that. Yeah, but see, now that I get older, arthritis started setting in, and that's what made it really, really bad. So.
Yeah, boy.
But anyway, so I got 2 knees. Thankful to wrestling, and a new ankle, and triple bypass. I am good to go, man. I am ready for one more match, and I'm going to chase Eddy Mansfield to the end of the world until I get him in here. He's going to have to get his hair blonde again. They get it nice and long. I don't know what it's like now.
Well, it's real.
But Randomania is going to run wild on the Continental Lover.
Yeah, if you'll wait about 4 more years, it'll turn gray. So I'll be honest.
Get that bottle.
Remember, boys, I'm older than both of you.
I hear you. Well,
hey, something. Randy, I just want to. Randy, I want to tell you this from the bottom of my heart. Those words meant the world to me, and I really thank you. They're from the heart, Eddie. They are from the heart. I've always felt that way. I always will. And I don't know what else to say except I sure hope we cross paths. I mean, we certainly live close enough if you're still here. Yeah, well, I've left. I was in Dr. Phillips, Bay Hill, and
right
now I moved. I'm gonna be out. I'm in Texas now, and so.
Are you?
But I'll come. But I'm coming. Hey, I'll come back. I'll be back to Orlando not long from now. And I'll call you and we'll hook up. We'll go have lunch and
that'd be great. I'm in Waterford Lakes, right here at
yeah, I know what that is.
right off of
Absolutely.
Colonial.
I'll tell you what, I'll come see you and I'll take you to lunch. Sound good?
You gonna take me to lunch?
Yeah.
Wow, Eddy Mansfield, the Continental lover, is gonna take me to lunch. I'll have to throw it up and put it in a plastic bag and keep it with my souvenirs. I will do that.
Oh my God.
Yeah, Eddie, I love you. Angelo, you too.
Thank Randy. I'll call you. I want to have you on in about a week. All right.
Whatever, man. I can't go nowhere. I'm sitting here with my leg in the stirrup, you know.
Oh, good. Then you come on here and make some people happy. All right.
There you go.
I'll do that. All right, brother. Take care.
Randy,
Eddie, I love you. Take care of yourself.
Brother. I'll give you a holler tomorrow. Okay.
All right, Angelo.
Take
love
care,
your show,
Randy.
baby.
Randy,
bye-bye, guys.
Buddy. Take care, Randy. Bye-bye. Eddie, we like surprising people on this show. Dan and I love getting people worked up.
Yes,
so
sir.
What do you didn't expect that one, did you?
No, Randy is very special. He's a real, hey, let me tell you something. Randy's a very dear friend of mine, and he's very, very special. He really is. He's a, you know, they don't make them better than that guy. They really don't. He's A1 in my book.
Yeah, he's a real good friend of mine. He's a real good friend of the show. When I was talking, Randy and I just had like kind of a little lazy conversation. I said, well, I got Eddy Mansfield coming on. He went, stop. He goes, Eddy Mansfield, he's the reason I got into the business. I went, no shit. So tell me more. So he starts telling me like he's telling me your life. I'm thinking, I gotta have more. I gotta have Randy surprise you.
There you go.
Yeah.
I called him last night. I said, showtime is 7:30. I want to call you at 8. I said, pick up the phone, demanding to speak to Eddy Mansfield.
Yeah.
So we conspired, brother. This was like 24 hours in the making.
But that's a good thing, because Randy's one of the guys that really needs a pat on the back. He loved this business more than anyone I've ever seen. And you know something?
Sincere about it too.
Hey, and let me tell you something. He was one hell of a talent too. I mean, he wasn't a joke. He did a good job, and to this day, you ask me about him, I'll tell you he's damn good. He can work in the ring, and he could talk, and he could do what needs to be done. And
absolutely.
And I just love him to death. But you know what I love about him? He can sing. This guy can sing.
I've never heard his music, to be honest with you, Eddie.
Oh, you need to have him play some of his old music. Oh my goodness gracious!
I'm gonna do that, Dan.
That's how come we used to go up to Ethel's gas house. You know, me and Wahoo and a bunch of others. And I want to talk about Wahoo in just a minute. But get some of Randy's music. But so Wahoo said that was the end of the business. Well, it was really the beginning. And you tell Karen
in a lot of ways, you're absolutely right. In a lot of ways, and Karen has said that, and Dan will tell you, Karen has said that a couple of times, and but she's never said it in a derogatory or like putting down manner.
Right.
You know what I mean? Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
It actually, just out of curiosity, do you happen to remember the name of the band that he played in?
Oh shit, no. I only saw him 1,002 times. Well, the problem was, guys, to be realistic. Now, and this is a truth show, isn't it? Isn't it about the truth?
Sir.
Yes, sir.
Well, Randy always had me this good-looking girl from Montgomery. This girl was so fine, and I was single back then, so I could say, and she was 9 in heavy chains, and I wasn't even paying attention to the damn band. And second of all, I could hear Randy singing, but I really wasn't paying a lot of attention to the band because I had some fine ass sitting next to me, and so I needed to be paying attention to her if I wanted to get anywhere that night.
Shit.
So it was. Hey, let me tell you, night in heavy chains, showtime, bright lights, big city, and all the pretty ladies, as they say. You know what I mean? So
rescue me, Daniel.
That's funny. I want to circle back real quick. You were talking about match stories, looking up some stuff to kind of prepare for the show and see what questions. I came across a match I was hoping you could tell me the story on, because it pops up in a lot of people's memories of you, but nobody really has the narrative for it. It was a match. It was May 22nd, 1981 at the Houston Coliseum. And it was you teaming with Tiny Tom against Scott Casey and Cowboy Lang. It was a mixed regular wrestler midget match. And I'm wondering if you could tell us the story behind that, because so many people seem to have memories of the match, but I couldn't find anything about what led up to it. Like how does that come about?
Well, that's one of them stupid ass booking decisions. But I don't know. I'd have to watch the match, because they had a couple of them for me and Scott, and I'd get heat on Scott, right? And he'd tag the midget, and the other midget would, the babyface midget would come in, and Lang would tag me, and I'd come in and I'd snatch that little bastard up, and I'd slam him and do all kind of shit, right? And I mean, the fans would go friggin' nuts, and I body slammed him, and I went up on that second rope and gave a damn elbow on that midget, and he says, "Don't do that to me anymore. You're going to kill me." I said, "Just get up." And so, I mean, I had fans literally coming next to the ringside, when I jumped the midget, right? So it's like, hey, and then I picked that midget up. The only time they really took a bump over the second rope was when I gave it to him. And so I gave him, I body slammed that midget off the top rope.
That's fun.
Oh my God.
Eddie, you've been compared from time to time. You've been compared to the late Gino Hernandez.
Hey, you tell them people go fuck themselves. Gino Hernandez, I could work better than Gino Hernandez, and I could talk is better than Gino. Gino Hernandez did not pop Southwest Championship Wrestling. Eddy Mansfield and Scott Casey popped Southwest Championship Wrestling. I don't want to be compared to Gino, that damn half-breed son of a bitch. I don't want anything to do with him. You know that?
Why do people, though, continually make that comparison?
Well, the comparison should be to me and Shawn Michaels, because Jose Lothario, that trained Shawn Michaels copied my style. That's my style you see with Shawn Michaels.
Yeah, that's pretty obvious, pretty clear.
Right.
You mean you can't really hide your style.
And if you've noticed what he said at the Cauliflower Alley Club when he received the award, one of the top 3 matches he's ever seen in the history of him wrestling was Scott Casey and myself in the hair versus hair in San Antonio, in the Hemisphere Arena, when we put in over 22,000, and I tried to get that damn cheap ass, promotion to go and do a closed circuit with at the Marriott on the riverfront, right, down from the Hemisphere, because we turned away 10,000 people that night.
Really?
Yeah, really.
Damn.
You turned away 10,000.
Ask the Cowboy. Scott Casey will tell you the truth. We turned away so many people. That was the toughest ticket in town, man.
I heard that that night was almost a $300,000 house, which was unheard of for that time in that area. Is that true, that number, $300,000 house?
Well, pretty close. it depends on what they actually turned in and what they stole. You know what I mean? So,
well, the average ticket price was $15, which by today's standards, like you can't buy a nosebleed ticket for $15.
Right.
But you know, you got to remember, $15 was like a lot of money for a wrestling ticket back then. So you figure like, say 10, $15 a pop, you know, 25,000 people. That's a nice piece of change, brother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hope you get your payday out of it.
That's the highest grossing show they had. Buck Robley told me that. He said when he came in the book, you know, me and Buck used to ride together, and he said that was the highest thing that they ever had, and Casey and me did it.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, Terry Funk and Dory Funk Jr. came over to me in the locker room, and you know, they're very dear friends of mine, and they came over and said, "Hey Ed, you drew this house, you know." I said, "No, me and Scott drew this house." And I said, "Without Scott, I wouldn't have been able to draw." And I said, "You guys helped as well." I said, "It's a team effort." And,
well, you have to have. Yeah, I mean, let's talk about that.
See,
Eddie.
You know, like Terry said. Terry said, "No, Ed, you and Scott Casey drew this house because everybody else in this room has been trying to draw and they couldn't draw it." And he made a point there.
Talk about that. That's a real great segue, Eddie, because one of the things that bothers Dan and I, especially on the show, is when people claim to have, you know, I'm the one who put the asses in the seats, or I'm the I, and me. They forget wrestling, you know, on the surface, it may look like an individual sport, but it's really a team sport.
Right.
Because it takes two people to make a match. And one of the things that bothers Dan and I is when people take credit for doing all the work when it takes two people.
Right.
So talk to me, because you mentioned this guy's name twice tonight, and we just lost him this year, Buck Robley. So let's talk about Buck Robley. What do you remember about this character, Buck Robley? Hell of a worker, by the way. As real as it got.
Now, if you were talking to Buck Robley right now, he'd go, "Angelo, you keep me abreast, young man." You know, it's like, in other words, call me and keep me abreast, young man, on every situation.
Yeah.
And so, but Buck, he's the only guy that I have ever heard of pop in Kansas City. He did that, and as a booker, and he booked it. And after Ole Anderson killed Atlanta, Georgia for the third fucking time, he went in and brought it back up, and then Ole came back in by threatening Barnett and got rid of Buck Robley, and then it went down again. And then at that time, me and Wahoo were flying in and out. I was one of the first guys, me and Wahoo, to really start flying around, and Terry Funk. And besides Junior, he was a world champion, or Terry, we were flying around. I was going to Detroit once a month, and Toronto. You know, I was flying all over the country, so I must have been pretty damn good, guys, to be able to do that back in those days.
Oh, sure.
And I look at myself, and I worked hard to get where I was.
Can I ask you a question right there, Eddie, and then continue your story? Because I got a question right there. How long did it take you to establish yourself as a top draw?
1 year.
From the time you got in to the time you were #1 box office.
My first year, I was Rookie of the Year. I was actually the only professional wrestler that has been Rookie of the Year 2 years in a row.
How you explain that one? How that happened?
Well, me and David Shultz were partners, and so in 1977, I was the NWA Rookie of the Year for Southeastern Championship Wrestling, right?
Oh, okay.
All right. So I was rookie of the year. So by NWA standards, I was rookie of the year, correct? And so then the next year they opened Knoxville. And so I was rookie of the year in 1978 too. So at 77 and 78, I finally looked at Schultz and I said, look, I came out of baseball. You can only be rookie of the year one time.
That's why I was asking you.
And I'm going like, how in the hell did I get rookie of the year twice? See, I lived with Ron Fuller. And in 77 and 78, I think it was. Yeah. And Ron, I think the world of Ron has got one of the greatest brains in the wrestling business. He really does. And I think the world of him.
Yeah.
And
so do we.
I talk about him sometimes, and you can tell him that and I told him before, I said, I just keep your name out there. I'll put heat on you just to put heat on you. But it's just like but he came from really the first family of wrestling.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
They had a monopoly on the wrestling business in the South.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We've talked about it.
You know that Jerry Jarrett's kin to him.
Yeah. Oh, I know. Ron's a good friend of mine. Ron and I talk a lot.
Did you know that Jerry Jarrett's kin to him?
Yeah. Yeah, I know Jerry too, actually.
How did you know that Jerry was kin to him?
Well, he talked about it on the show.
Okay. Well, I guess you know that.
Yeah. Well, no, he told the whole world.
Right.
He told the whole world.
We get the scoops out of people here.
Old man Roy Welch was going with Christine Jarrett.
Yeah.
And that's how Jerry Jarrett came about. So, in other words, I was saying this on the show, and I shouldn't say this, and I'm not going to say it. I am just not going to say it. But anyway, all these people that were kin were running all these, territories.
Yeah.
And so, if you wasn't a heel, you were in trouble.
Yeah.
Because there wasn't no babyface spots at all. So, when me and Schultz used to travel together, we always rode by ourselves because if anything got out of that car, we knew one or the other one told it. So,
you know what, Eddie? You just brought up something so fucking critical, so important that it's lost on the young people today. Let's talk about a territory. First of all, let's explain to the young people what a territory is. But let's talk about when a territory is very heel heavy, or what they call heel loaded. Right. A lot of people may not understand, but the territories, especially down south, were very heel heavy because the heel could make some serious money down south. And you almost never heard of a baby face down south because it was heel versus heels match, which was like super money. That was like as shoot as you can get with, still keeping it in the work. Tell people the dynamic of that. You and I need to smarten up the young Squire Daniel because he's just a pup and he may not know this, even though he tells me, Eddie, that he's the smartest guy in the room. Right, Dan?
Always.
Okay, so talk to Eddie. Let him smarten you up.
Well, shoot. It's like we would only ride, like me and David would only ride together because we didn't want any other wrestlers in the car to hear what we had to say. Because you had guys like Dutch Mantell that were huge stooges, and there's so many other guys that were stooges, but those guys, he was really a stooge, and he was bad. And so when you look at the other stooges, you just had to be careful because me and David were pioneer in Pensacola and pioneer in Knoxville. We were the last guys. Our crew with Ronnie Garvin and David Schultz and myself and Ron and Robert and Jimmy Golden Now that's another one. That's another cousin. Okay.
Sure.
Jimmy Golden.
Absolutely.
So, so they could stack a card with just their kinfolks. And so so David and me were working Knoxville and Pensacola at the same time. We would be going back and forth every week,
Mm-hmm.
back and forth. And we popped that sucker. And that's really the last time it really drew big was, when me and Schultz and, Ron Fuller, Robert, and Jimmy Golden, and that's when Bob Roop, Ronnie Garvin, Great Malenko, Ron Wright, and all them did that kayfabe.
Yeah.
They talked about they never had a real match and all that. Did you ever see any of that? Have you seen that, Angelo?
Yeah, I actually have. I actually have. Yeah,
okay.
Sure have.
Okay. So how in the hell are they going to say anything about me? But anyway, and I got screwed on my show. That's the problem. If they would have done the show right, it would have came out better. But
yeah,
I learned a lot. Because I hadn't been in the TV business then. But if I'd have been in the business now, I'd have had final edit.
Yeah. Eddie, let's talk about. I just wanted to throw a topic out there and have you and Dan discuss this. Let's talk about certain areas that are southern hotspots for wrestling. Of course, Texas, Tennessee, Oklahoma, Florida, Georgia. These have always been traditional hotspots for wrestling. I want you and Dan to explore why. Dan, go there.
Yeah, we've touched on that on the show before. There's always seems to be pockets. If you grab 20 wrestlers at random, odds are 10 of them are going to be from Texas. There's going to be a couple from Florida, a couple from Tennessee, and the rest are from New York, New Jersey. And I'm just wondering, and you travel the territories a lot, and that goes back to the black and white era. I mean, you hear stories from the 30s and 40s of the carnival shows, and they were huge in the traveling South. What is it about the crowds down there, the people down there that just draw? Because obviously you don't get wrestlers that coming from areas unless the kids in the crowd grow up to want to be wrestlers. What is it about that area, those crowds, that just breed people that want to step in the ring?
Good question.
Well, rednecks get violent very easy.
Redneck. So that's it. Rednecks like to hit people.
Well, rednecks get violent very easy. Well, if I go on TV and I'm talking to a guy saying, "Hey, you know good and well that your wife is looking at your fat self and looking at me on TV and wants to be with me instead of you sitting in that lazy boy."
Well,
that's why she's going to buy a ticket. Oh no, let me correct myself. This is why she's going to make you buy 2 tickets to watch me walk the aisle, Daddy-O. That's why.
Well, let me ask you something. We touched on it when I was talking with Scott Casey last week, and Angela's brought it up on the show before. Every territory in that area had a cowboy character, had a Western character. Yet, it seemed like the general heel was kind of molded after what you became. It was always the cowboys against the pretty boy and the flamboyance and the big hair. And why is it that kind of character, that pretty boy, arrogant, pretty hair, handsome, cut, why is that such a good heel in the South?
Well, I know that in Texas and in Georgia and Pensacola and Knoxville, that being a nice looking guy doesn't hurt, and keeping yourself groomed and keeping yourself bathed, on a normal basis, smelling good, looking good, And, them women, you draw the women, and people want to like you, but you got to do something to piss them off to make them hate you. And that's just the way it is. And I used to lull them in, and they would want to love me so bad, you have no idea. And then I'd turn that knife on them so fast that it'd make their head swim.
Boom.
I'm sorry,
go ahead.
That starts drawing money. And, it not only could I work in the ring, take the bumps, do the high spots, do whatever I needed to do, but I could talk on that microphone. And I would get you, as you're interrupting me. You know something? If you were interviewing me like you're trying to interview me, I would look at you and say, before I was rudely interrupted, I was trying to say this. See what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So Dan, that's how you get heat. There's no heat now. You got guys.
No, absolutely not.
There's no damn heat. Hell, they're more excited to go out to mix with the fans and sign autographs than they are being a real heel. You know something?
Well, yeah, you know what? We just had, that's a really good point. A great segue too. Dan and I, Eddie, just had, one of the biggest heat-seeking missiles in the business next to yourself on the show. Larry Zbyszko was with us. And, we talked about, of course, the
Larry Land, baby. Larry Land. That's
Larry
my boy.
Land,
I love Larry. Yeah, I love Larry.
Larry's a great guy. To be that hated a heel, you've got to be up against someone who is absolutely adored and beloved, and it didn't hurt his career at all that the guy who he went up against happened to be Bruno Sammartino, who was like a saint in the business. So yeah, I mean, it
didn't hurt me, Angelo. It didn't hurt me to be going against the cowboy.
Exactly.
That looks like the Marlboro Man. Let me tell you something.
Exactly. And people don't understand that. You have this mindset. And you think of the cowboy gimmick, and Dan and I actually did a whole show on the cowboy gimmick. But you have this idea. You think of the cowboy. I think of the first thing that comes to mind. The first two people that come to mind when I think of the wrestling cowboy, Scott Casey and Jack Mulligan. And two guys who could not be more opposite if they tried.
When I had the IWF out of Universal Studios, Jack Mulligan was my world champion.
Yeah.
And, Jack was cool. And Jack, he could cut a promo. And he was a big guy. He was
6'8",
one of the biggest guys. Oh, he was huge.
Oh, God, yeah.
But I tell you that Scott Casey, for me and him, it just clicked, and it really worked. And we drew money up in St. Louis too, and it's like, I don't know, it just worked. And Scott, to this day, is one of the most underrated guys that in the history of the business, and myself as well.
Well, Dan and I will absolutely.
They hate me because of the 2020. But when you take 2020 away and you play my damn matches against anybody, I'll put my work up against anybody.
I got news for you, pal. You don't have to. I'll do it for you.
Right.
I'll put your work
up.
I
appreciate that.
Listen, Dana and I want to talk to you a little bit. We've had this discussion early on in the show, several months ago, but we want to talk a little bit about some of the history between yourself, because you mentioned Universal in Florida. We want to talk about some of the history between yourself and Eric Bischoff. Now, my understanding is that Eric Bischoff was trying to pick your brain a little bit, not understanding really who you were or who you are, and thought that he was going to get one over on Eddy Mansfield. Can you walk me through that? You know where I'm going with this, so, and I know that you know where I'm going with this, so walk me through that.
Right.
Let's talk about the WCW/Universal connection.
Well, I got a call at my office and from Eric Bischoff, and they put him through to me, and I said, "Hello." He said, "This is Eddy Mansfield." I said, "Yes, it is." He said, "This is Eric Bischoff." I said, "Hello, Eric. How are you?" And he says, "I want to make this quick." I said, "Okay, that's fine. I'm busy." And so he said, I want to bring wrestling into Universal. And I said, "Well, Eric, Universal already has a wrestling federation." And he said, "Well, we'll give you Sting or we'll give you this." I said, "You know something? This is in the early 90s. I said, "Eric, there's nobody you got that I want because none of them will draw." I said, if you were drawing, you wouldn't be trying to steal my gimmick with putting fans in the seats out of the theme park. You would.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you want to come to Universal except to steal my idea?" And
That's a fair
said,
point.
Exactly.
And I said, "You know something, Eric?" I said, "You know, this conversation's over. You know, wrestling. Hey, Universal already has a wrestling federation, and it's not going to be WCW. Thank you very much. Talk to you later." And I hung up. That's the exact way it really happened.
Go ahead, Dan.
Let me ask you something, Eddie. You were talking earlier, and that kind of ties into it because Eric Bischoff was one of the forces that sort of pushed that movement. Through the 70s, you had, your Bruno and Vern Gagne and all these guys. It was the heels were always hated. Yes, we could respect the talent, be it someone like you or the Sheik or somebody like that, but there was never the mass appeal. Even through the 80s with your Rick Rudes and Jake Roberts, and then you had these guys who were booed but respected. Some point in the late 80s, early 90s, between like the Horsemen and the NWO and the rise of Steve Austin and the WWF, at some point being the heel became popular. I'm curious if you have any insight as to what changed with the crowds, where, if you had merchandise back in your prime, half the crowd would be wearing Eddy Mansfield shirts and not, whoever the face was. What changed in the crowd where the person who was booed, the person who was pushed as the villain, became cool and everybody wanted to love that guy instead?
I'll tell you.
Well, it's just kind of like a Las Vegas Raider mentality, and you just, I don't know, it just flipped. They didn't have the baby faces, except Hogan, and that was about it.
I'll tell you what I think it happened if I can throw my 2 cents in. First of all, Dan mentioned something, Eddie, that's very important. He talked about merchandise, the heel merch. It's old school as I am, and you and I are probably old school. The heels never had merch. It was always the baby face that had merch. Heels never had merch. But I think it changed, and I could probably pinpoint the moment. It goes back to probably Steve Austin, Bret Hart, in that I Quit match. The moment that Bret bloodied Steve Austin and made him say "I quit," that was the turning point, because Bret was the baby face going in, and he was the heel coming out.
Mm-hmm.
And there was no obvious heel baby face turn, no clear turn. It's the crowd that felt sympathy for Austin that made him the baby in that match. Would you agree with that, Eddie?
Well, absolutely. Keep telling those stories. Tell 2 or 3 more stories and link it really in. because you're almost there now.
Okay. What am I missing?
Well, I mean, then you start looking at Undertaker. Then you start looking at
I got you. Okay. I got you. I see where you're going.
What I mean?
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, it's always been, again, it's always been told to me that if you're a heel, you never sell merch, you never sign autographs if you're a heel. If you're a kayfabing, a heel character, you don't want to sign a kid's autograph. You want to tell him, go away, you little rotten squirt or whatever. You know, that's a true heel. Like Chris Jericho told the story that used to break his heart when he got home, but he would be in an elevator with a young fan and he would ignore him. He'd, push his autograph paper away. But he was the heel, and he kayfabed it from the moment he arrived to the time he left. And he was that character at every moment he was in public. When you do that, is there a psychological weight that's added to your daily day, or do you just have to decompress at some point?
Well, what I used to do is I would make his autograph more valuable. When I'd have kids come up to me or catch me somewhere, yeah. I'd go, yeah, no problem. I'll sign it for you. And then I'd go, best of luck, Scott Casey. And then I hand it back to him.
Oh, jeez. Go ahead, Dan.
That's hilarious.
So his autograph is really more expensive now because it was Eddy Mansfield that signed Scott Casey's name.
Oh, for God's sake.
That's too funny.
By the way, I should tell. I'm sorry, Dan.
Go ahead.
I promise you, I'm not used to interrupting you, but I promise you, I want to tell everybody now, while they still have you here, Eddy Mansfield will be joining us again, and he will be joining us with Cowboy Scott Casey. I am going to reunite Mansfield and Casey together again on Wrestling with the Future, and these guys are going to talk about their careers, their matches, the money that they made, the territories that they created, and in some cases, at one case I know of, if you want to talk about it, Eddie, a territory that you and Scott actually saved from folding up. You want to talk about that?
Well, tell me which one that would be.
I believe that would be Southwest.
I just wanted you to hear. I just wanted you to say it.
Yeah.
What a dick move.
Oh, it's like,
hey, look, if you say go for it, I'm going to go for it.
Yeah, go for it. That's it, baby.
There you go. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I heard that Southwest was pretty well in the shitter.
Yeah, it was pretty, it wasn't good. That's why Wahoo told me coming in from Atlanta and in the Southwest. They were pushing Tully Blanchard, and Tully Blanchard couldn't draw two knobs of goat shit.
Well, that's kind of where I'm thank you for going there, because Eddie, that's where Dan and I want to go right now. Joe Blanchard, they say, was a hell of a promoter, but he made the mistake of putting Tully as the booker.
Well,
was
he
that
wasn't
his
the booker,
mistake, or?
But he wasn't the booker at when I came in. Wahoo McDaniel was the booker.
Oh, Wahoo.
But I can tell you what, I was at the booking. Every Tuesday morning, I was with Wahoo booking, and Tully Blanchard would call at 10:30 every Tuesday morning begging for his belt. And so here's what I did. To get me and Casey a top spot, I had Wahoo tag up Gino Hernandez and Tully Blanchard. And then that way it left the spot for Casey and me on top. If not, Tully Blanchard would take the top spot because he is daddy on the territory. See what I mean?
Right. Well,
so that way. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead. I thought you were finished. I apologize.
No, I'm done.
Well, let me kind of have you expand on that. You were brought in as a heel. It goes to what Angela was talking about earlier, where the heel is the one that brings the money. I guess maybe kind of expand on that. You had people that were being pushed, these big baby faces that were as my Jim Cornette used to say, couldn't draw money if you gave them green paper and a marker. You couldn't. That you came in and you were able to just, because the crowd was so invested in watching you lose, it elevated the faces around you. Kind of put us in that mindset, because the common conception, and it's a misconception, as we've touched on among fans, is it's the faces. Any heel that goes against Bruno or Bruno Sammartino is going to get elevated. Any of the AWA heels that got in the ring with Vern Gagne were elevated, when in fact in most of the territories the faces were elevated by the heels who had to shoulder the burden. I was wondering if you could kind of expand on that.
Oh boy. Well, what was really cool about me, I had a lot of publicity out of magazines and rated in the top 10 and most hated, and then me and Bad Leroy Brown were top 10 tag team. I was in the top 10 for the world's belt, and that helped, with the fans. And then when I started in and doing my thing, it just got over. And it got over because I made sure it got over. And you just can't show up. See, they tried to follow me with Bobby Jaggers. Well, Bobby Jaggers ain't even in the same class I'm in. I'm just telling you. I mean, when I left Southwest Championship Wrestling, they tried to have Jaggers take my spot. Well, you can ask Scott Casey. Bobby Jaggers was no Eddy Mansfield. And
Scott has talked about, Eddie, to validate that point, Eddie, Scott's been on the show, and he's talked about that run that he had with Bobby Jagger. He doesn't speak fondly of it, to be honest with you. I have a feeling that was one of those things that Scott did just because he had to and get it out of the way. But Dan and I kind of got the feeling that he just as rather soon not have had to deal with Bobby Jaggers at all. Was he? Well, he couldn't. Well, I was going to say, because I heard he couldn't work.
Well, after following me and selling out everywhere, and then you go with this guy who couldn't sell out the damn fucking Seguin, with 3,000 people. So, I mean, you go from selling out arenas at 22 and 23,000 to 18,000 to all over Texas, Beaumont to everywhere. I mean, you just name it. Wherever they put it on the map, we sold out.
Yeah.
And, I'll tell you a story. Oh, Jerry Briscoe called me up. Bobby Jaggers was known for lying a lot,
we heard he was we heard Bobby Jaggers was an office stooge.
Yeah, on top of that. But if his lips were moving, he was lying, right?
Oh, Jesus.
So Jerry Briscoe calls me up one morning. He goes, "Hey, Ed." I go, "Yeah." He said, Bobby Jaggers died. I said, "Well, I'll be damned." I said, "Jerry, I guarantee you that his ass is in heaven right now lying to God."
Oh man.
And that damn, Jerry just died laughing. Well, it's true. He's up there lying to God. I guarantee you.
Well, let me kind of finish this narrative out. I look at you mentioned
Dan,
earlier.
You know why I'm a heel now? Because it's just the way it is,
Well, let me finish this narrative out. You mentioned earlier, your obvious influence you had on Shawn Michaels' career. His character, when he evolved from the rocker Shawn Michaels to the Eddy Mansfield knockoff, it was hugely over. And a lot of the heels in the 90s into today took their inspiration from the territory days. Some of the biggest heels of your generation are literally shot for shot. There's remakes of people that are over today. But if you take Tully Blanchard, and don't get me wrong, I'm a huge fan. He's one of the pictures behind me. You put him in today's market, he's not over. You take somebody like a
he wasn't over then either, so it don't matter.
What I mean is the territory face doesn't translate to today's crowd, but the territory heel would be over this today the same way you were back then. What is it about the heels like what you did that's generational versus the cowboy clean cut high in the saddle face of the 70s and 80s that just doesn't sell today?
Well, number one, you're wrong. Not I guarantee you, if I booked WWE for 1 year and I brought back the Cowboys, I brought me back 2 Cowboys, then I brought me back an Indian, right? And then I brought me back a blonde guy. Then I brought back some two big old guys that was a great tag team together, and I put them together. I guarantee I draw money.
Well, because you're doing something. Think about what you just said.
Yeah, but the only reason they're not drawing now, it's all vanilla. You have no characters anymore.
And I was just going to say to you, think about what you're saying, Eddie. You're talking about characters. There are no characters. There are no the easiest thing in the world to be in wrestling is a heel. And you know why? All you got to do is be honest and tell the lady in the front row that she's fat and ugly. That's all you I mean, am I lying? This is psychology 101. This is wrestling psychology.
There's a lot more to being a heel than that. You gotta be able to call them out.
I'm giving you the Reader's Digest version.
But I'm telling you, you can't be afraid.
What you're saying is, let's bring back the characters. Everybody's vanilla because they're first of all, they're afraid to rock the boat. They're afraid to be politically insensitive. You want to be politically insensitive. That's what wrestling is. It goes against the grain. It's the catharsis for the working man. He wants to tell his boss to go F himself. He wants to do all this. You know?
Absolutely.
I get on my soapbox and then I'm just showing how fucking old I really am. You know?
but it's true.
Here's a segue for you. You ready for this segue? You're going to love this, Eddie. Do you have sweaty balls or volleyball ready balls? It's time to make them ready balls. The Manscaped Lawnmower 3.0. This I got to pay bills here. The Lawnmower 3.0 is it will do the job and clean your knob with its patented no-nick head. It will function as desired, so your head will work as desired. And Dan, all I'm seeing is your balls will thank you. Put that box down. Dan, take me out of the spot.
Yeah, that sounds like Margaret out of Houston.
Man, you know, well, Eddie talked about earlier about saving the business, and Angela was just bringing up our sponsor, which is really important because it saves the most important thing on you, and that's your boys, especially in this kind of weather we've been having. And from manscaped.com, you can use promo code WrestlingFuture for 20% off their current package They have the Lawnmower 3.0. Comes with the ball deodorizer, the ball spray, a replacement head plan, and a series of wipes that are out now, as well as various other products. They have a wide array of products you can check out for all your manscaping needs. Manscaped.com, promo code WrestlingFuture for 20% off. And like I said with the sign, Manscaped.com, your balls will thank you.
There you go.
Hey, and
how's that for a segue?
I can genuinely say that you guys are nuts.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, Eddie, I tell you what,
but you know something, Angelo?
Yes, sir.
When you let me finish my thought.
Yes, sir. Please. Yes, sir.
You know, with bringing in, you know, the gimmicks like they used to be, and what they failed to do, they got all these dumbass writers who's never been in the ring and all this other stuff, and instead of letting the guys do their own promos and be their own, you know, personality.
Thank you.
And you know what's going? See, they're trying to put everything into a month. Each month they have to create something new. Well, they're not talented enough to do that. And here's what I would do. You remember how we used to do the angles and they would last 6 months? I would run an angle.
Oh my God, yeah.
I would shoot an angle on top and run that 6 months. And if it ran through SummerSlam, if it ran through this, it ran through that, so be it. And then with my tag belts, my Intercontinental belt, and, you know, TV belt, I'd run all my angles all the way through until they wouldn't draw. And then I'd start building guys underneath to take their place.
And that's the problem. Eddie, you're exactly right. That's the problem. Nobody knows today how to run a program. They can't run a program. There are no angles. There are no characters to bring forward angles. You've got no personalities left. Where are the last great character that WWE had? They took a giant shit on him and they let it die. The Fiend. That was, you know, Bray Wyatt's Fiend. What do they call it, Dan? The Firefly.
The Firefly Funhouse.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. At least, such as it was a character. You know, Bray Wyatt and the Wyatt family, or you even had, you know, shades of the Undertaker, for crying out loud. You know, they took a guy like Brody Lee and did absolutely nothing with him in AEW, thank God. Picked him up and they're doing something with Brody Lee.
Yep.
You know, he's a guy, very much, if you look at Brody Lee, very much a throwback to Frank Bruiser Brody, one of our favorite people here.
Yeah.
Because Barbara's a dear friend of the show. Barbara Goodish is a dear friend of mine, great friend of the show. And by the way,
ask her next time you get Barbara on.
Yes, sir.
Ask her about that crazy Buck Robley, and she'll have 1,000 stories about him.
I'm sure she does. Yeah, Barb's going to be coming back on with Karen, and we're going to bring the wives back again. We Dan and I, you'll appreciate this, Eddie. We did a show with Wrestling Wives. We had Jimmy Snuka's wife, Carol. We had Karen McDaniel and Barb Goodish. And that was a hoot. I want to tell you what, brother. I think Dan and I maybe said 5 words the whole show.
That's good. Well, you know, that's kind of like being at home, Angelo. You don't ever get to talk.
You're pretty much right about You're pretty much right about that. Well, I'll tell you what,
I know I know when I'm at home, I don't say about 2 or 3 words, yes or no. That's it.
That's it.
And I never say no. I usually say yes, you know. So that's
exactly.
That works.
Well, listen, my friend, I'm going to have to let you go. We're going to bring you and Scott back in a couple of weeks for Mansfield and Casey reunited, all right? So any parting words before I let you go? Anything to plug, anything to promote, whatever you want.
Yeah, well, I got 2 shows that we're going to be doing coming up. The original Country Gold with Rowdy Yates and Tex. the company keeps. That's what I'm going to be doing. That's my next 2 series coming out, and I'm really excited about it. And I appreciate you guys having me on the show. I love you to death. And
we love you. You have quickly become one of our favorites here, babe.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Well, I hope I entertained you enough tonight, and I hope I entertained the fans, and that's
Absolutely.
the key. And
yes, sir.
For all you fans listening, always remember, wrestling is going to make a bigger comeback than it was before, and always look back at some of the guys like myself and Casey and Wahoo and Brody and Buck Robley, and you'll see how the business in Blackjack Mulligan, that was the way the business was really done. And give these guys a shake, with AEW and WWE. Give them a fair shot before writing them off, because you never know when they're going to make that right turn and things are going to be just as great as it was before. And I want to thank you for listening. You guys for having me.
Thank you, Eddie. God bless you. Have a great night, my friend. Eddy Mansfield, everybody.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Eddie.
Take care. All right.
Good night, Eddie. Bye-bye. Daniel, that was a never a dull moment with Eddy Mansfield. I think we finally met a guy that interrupts you more than I do.
We always say we love the guests that you just point them in the right direction and they can talk forever.
I'm gonna tell you what, man. Scott, Casey, and Eddy Mansfield. Like I said, that show.
Right.
You make sure that your wife has plenty to drink for you sitting on the sidelines.
I was about to say,
you can get your work done. You can drink some coffee. You can have a meal.
I was just
you
about
might
to
get
say,
to ask a question.
I was about to ask, are you even going to need me for that episode? Short of hello and goodbye. What words are we going to get?
I might need you to do the Manscaped spot.
There you go.
That was a great interview. I love Eddy Mansfield. I tell you what, he genuinely seemed to be happy to hear from Randy Hogan tonight.
Yeah, well, and you could tell in Randy's voice, like he actually started getting emotional. Like that was a real bond. And you don't. Yeah. That's another thing. And a lot of the guys we've had on have talked about that. That's something. Even Brian Pillman Jr. touched on it. Being younger, you don't have that bond among the guys today.
Well, you got to remember something, Dan. Especially the old school guys. These guys used to spend more time with their work partners than they did their domestic partners, their wives and, husbands and wives and significant others. They spent more time in the car with each other, going from places, they used to share the same hotel rooms and sometimes, eat in the car or eat on the run or whatever the case may be. But they spent, Karen McDaniel really gave us kind of the bird's eye view of that one. When the boys have to take you home because you're too drunk to drive and you can't stand up. And remember the night she said Roddy Piper took her home, took Wahoo home, and said, "You Mrs. McDaniel, here. Does this belong to you?"
Yeah.
I think it's
what
Piper
what I found
said.
In the parking lot. I think it's yours.
Yeah. Exactly. Yes. Well, think about it. They spent a lot of time with each other back in the day.
Yeah,
but these guys now, at least I'll qualify it, Dan, by saying this, and you can correct me if you think I'm wrong. The guys that you see on television are spoiled. I think they've got too much. They've been given too much. They haven't worked for it. They haven't earned it. The guys that are working the indies, though, that are getting in their cars and driving from place to place, old school style, those guys like Brian Pillman Jr., those guys like Teddy Hart, that are, even though they have names, are still paying their dues, Yeah. Brian's not afraid to take an indie job anywhere.
Right.
He'll work for $100. He don't care because he knows he's got a contract with the MLW, right?
Yeah, and he's been popping up on the Dark, the AEW internet show. He's been wrestling with them.
See him. I think you're going to see him because they're getting ready to offer him a contract.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I think that's pretty well given. And we said that even on this show.
Yeah, and well, he mentioned to us that he had a premiere coming up that he wasn't allowed to talk about yet. And then not 2 weeks later he was on AEW Dark for the first time.
Yeah, and he couldn't talk about it, but we saw it. We absolutely saw it, and God bless him and good for him, because if anybody deserves it, this kid deserves it. He's a nice guy. He's a genuinely nice guy.
Mm-hmm.
He will, by the way, be coming back. Brian Pillman Jr. will be coming back.
Yes, sir.
I hinted toward the beginning of the show we have a lot of return guests coming back, and boy do we, including Tombstone Jesus, Lanny Poffo. Magnum TA is coming back. The Eddy Mansfield, Scott Casey, of course. Those two, forget about it. And a number of people. Vince Russo, we talked about Vince. Vince will be back. I actually talked to Vince last night.
Awesome.
And good guy, really good guy. I would love to be able to get, if you know anyone, Dan, reach out amongst your spider web of connections. I'd love to be able to get Eric Bischoff on the show.
Oh, man.
So that's your task, my friend.
Oh,
in between your 70 hours, on your lunch break, check it out. I'd love to get Eric Bischoff on the show, even if I got him for like a half an hour,
right?
Just to get him to say hello or fuck off, whatever. I'd love to have him on. So, Dan, anything to promote? Anything to plug? Anything to plug?
Well, I mean, we've got. Come on, I've been doing this long enough. Obviously, on the YouTube channel, Wrestling with the Future can also be found on Twitter at Wrestling Future. That's no G. We're on Instagram, Wrestling with the Future. We have anywhere podcasts can be listened to, Wrestling with the Future podcast. We continue to grow and expand on that front. Obviously, all the links. We've got the wonderful T-shirt that Angelo's sporting right now, and anywhere we can be found on social media, Wrestling with the Future. We've got a bunch of great guests coming up, a bunch of shows coming up, and we're going to continue to grow, continue to do our thing, and have fun with it.
Absolutely. For Dan the Man Sebastiano, the Happy Haberdasher, I'm Angelo DeCipio. As always, till next time, happy wrestling, and we'll see you later.